Hi and welcome back. The next thing we're going to do as we expand this network, this test network to see how Ansible works, is we need to add some routers. So again, we're in our GNS3 Ansible test network, just continuing from where we left off. This time I'm going to add some routers. Now, just a few words about this. These routers that I'm using are just standard iOS routers in this local configuration. Some of you have more advanced setups where you're using GNS3 VMs or GNS3 remote servers and so forth. But for our purposes, we're going to keep this very, very simple. Okay, so let's bring some routers. Oh, and one other thing before I continue, if you need to understand how to get iOS configurations and so forth, they are not free. You have to have licenses, and there's an explanation back at the how-tos in the GNS3 part of the reference area. So check that out if you need to know more about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab and pull several routers into our topology. Let's put 4. There we go. And I'll just close this off. So I've added 4 routers here into our network topology, and we need to connect them. So let's use our connector tool. We'll go from fast Ethernet 00 up to the switch. Fast Ethernet 00 up to the switch. Just bringing them into the network. Now these systems are down at this point, and they are not configured. Very good. Okay, excellent. We'll just clean this up a little bit. Let's put the labels at the bottom so I think they can be more clearly seen. And we can just fix a couple of these interface labels, not a big deal. All right, excellent, excellent. So I think we're ready to go here. Let's start up these routers. So start, router 2, start, router 3, start, and router 4, start. Okay, so these devices are now all running, and you can see very, very low CPU utilization, even though I'm running 4 instances of Cisco's iOS here. The next thing we want to do is console and begin the configuration of these routers just so that they are up. Part of that configuration, in order to work with Ansible, is that they need to accept SSH connections. And by the way, that's all that Ansible needs. This was certainly explained in the introduction video, but all Ansible needs is to be able to SSH to a router. And that's really all we're going to do. So the smart thing to do if you're a network engineer is to have a default configuration that just puts whatever you need in your routers by default, right? You can certainly configure this into GNS3. I didn't want to get into all that, so I just did it as a separate file. That file, by the way, is available, so I will make this available just below the video, and you can certainly copy it if you wish. So here's the file. I've got it in gedit, and you can see it's just a little script here to go into the router, configure its host name. I also configure some alias commands. I like to save my typing as much as possible. Show run, config terminal, all of those are just done with individual letters. A couple of things just in configuration, turning off timestamps, etc. And then, and this is where we kind of get into this whole thing with making sure that we have the proper access to the router. So you can see I've got login, I've got no exec timeouts, privilege level set to 15. But most importantly, on the VTY line, you can see here that I have login local, transport input all, and then an IP domain name, cellstream.com, and then a crypto key generation. This is the 1024 modulus. So this allows SSH to connect to this router securely, okay? Then finally, I'm putting an IP address that fits our network configuration. If you recall, we've done the 192.168.1. something. So I'm going to start with 101 for router 1, and then you'll see I'll change this as we go to router 2, router 3, and router 4. Also, I've created some usernames here, and this is again for the SSH login. You can see I've got a username called student with a password of CSI123, and that user has a privilege level of 15. So again, that kind of gives us a base configuration. There's probably a little bit more here than you would maybe do. Maybe you wouldn't use the aliases and so forth, but you need this base configuration in order for Ansible to be able to SSH and log in and then configure all of your routers and to begin the automation process. And then lastly, I just end the configuration and will write it. So this looks like it's all ready for router 1. So perfect. Let's go back and console into router 1. All right. Oops, there we go. We can see the router has booted up. And good, we have the privilege mode prompt. So let's grab all of this configuration. I'm just going to select the whole thing, copy it, and I just think I moved my mouse there. So let's just do it again just for safety. And paste. There we go. So that base configuration has been now configured into router 1, and I have written it to memory. So that will now, if that router resets or anything like that, that base configuration is in there, and the router will now accept SSH. Now there's some things we have to do with Ansible in order to make this work, but we've got the router ready. We don't really need to do, in a network automation environment, anything else to the router at this point. Let's just test that it is indeed connected. So you can do a show IP interface brief, or if you remember my commands there on the left, right? To do that, I just have to type an I. So I'm just going to type an I, show me the interfaces. We can see the 192.168.1.101 address is configured, and it is up and up, so perfect. So let's try to ping 192.168.1.2, which would be the Ansible system. Now, of course, we'll do an ARP first, followed by pings. Oh, very good. There we go. That's exactly what we got. We had an ARP first, so the first one failed. And then, of course, everything was running. Let's also ping the Ubuntu server. That was at 1.3. And again, same thing. There we go. Same thing. Perfect. Everything looks great. So router 1 is now part of the network, and Ansible can talk to it. So we can, of course, finish the configuration with Ansible in the next video. Meanwhile, let's go figure out how to do the rest of the router. So we need to do router 2. We'll make that 102. There we go. That should be everything that we need to do there. Again, Control A, Control C, and let's console to router 2. While we're at it, we'll console to router 3 and console to router 4 to speed this up just a little bit. And let's go to router 2 and paste in the config. So again, it's the same SSH config, the same username, and so forth. We'll write that. Now let's go do router 3. You can see how I've changed those addresses. And paste. Perfect. And we wrote it. Okay, good. One more to go. Router 4. And we'll make that 104. Copy it. And paste. So again, SSH is now available to us there. All right, so if everything is working, we should go back to the network automation console, and we should be able to ping all of these routers, 192.168.1.2, 1.101 for router 1. Yes, that's working. 102 for router 2. Yes, we can reach it. 103. Yes, that looks good. And finally 104. So we now have added to our topology 4 routers. They're all reachable from the network automation appliance. And what we'll do next is we'll set up Ansible so that it can now actually connect to all of these routers and start talking to them.